A famous actress must find a way to escape after a disdainful painter abducts and imprisons her. While taking his students on a walk in the woods, school teacher Bernard spots a clothless woman sunbathing by the lake. As the children continue down the trail, the man stays behind for a few minutes and creepily takes several photographs using his camera. Meanwhile, Jeanne, a woman with a disfigured face, stares back at a child who won't stop looking at her. Eventually, the girl's mother tells the child to sit back down and stop disrespectfully gawking at the lady. Later, while Jeanne walks through the woods, she hides behind a tree and watches the woman by the lake, Isabelle, putting her clothes back on. That afternoon, Pierre, the bar owner, welcomes Isabelle into his establishment and says he can't believe he's talking to the famous Dutch actress. Suddenly, Jeanne, who works there as a bartender, serves the woman's drink, and her sour expression shows her resentment for the attention the actress receives. Weeks ago, Isabelle attended the premiere of her latest movie alongside her director boyfriend, Rogier. A reporter asked what she plans on doing next, so she said they're filming another movie in July, but she'd like to go on holiday first. The next day, the actress heads out to go on her daily swim at the lake. Her parents ask her to eat lunch first, but she says she's skipping meals because she has to lose weight for her next film. The mother asks if she has her phone with her, and the woman says it's in her room because she's charging it. While sunbathing, Isabelle hears a rustling noise, so she puts her bikini top on and calls out, but no one answers. As she swims in the water, Jeanne and her dog, George, suddenly emerge from the trees. She gives the woman a friendly wave, but instead of waving back, the bartender releases the animal and it swims toward the terrified actress. Just before George reaches Isabelle, Jeanne says she'll call the dog back only if she does as she says. After the woman fearfully agrees to her terms, the bartender calls the animal back. When George returns to the shore, Jeanne attaches the leash. Unsure of what's happening, Isabelle quickly puts on her wrap dress and awkwardly says goodbye. However, as she starts to run away, the bartender orders the dog to chase her down. The woman reiterates that the actress has to do as she says or she'll sick the dog on her again. Then, the bartender hands Isabelle her designer shoes and introduces herself. Eventually, Jeanne takes the woman back to her house. The confused actress asks why she's there, so the bartender shows her the painting studio. Isabelle wonders why there aren't any paintings hanging on walls, and Jeanne says they're in a different room. However, the woman still doesn't understand why she's in the house, so the bartender says she wants to do a series of paintings of her. Isabelle laughs and says she could have just asked, but Jeanne knows that if she did, she never would have agreed to it. The actress wonders why she assumed she'd immediately say no, so the bartender says it's because the series will take months to finish. Baffled, Isabelle says she can't commit to a months-long project because she has to film her next movie in July. Eventually, the bartender pushes the woman down a flight of stairs, and when she regains consciousness, she realizes she's being imprisoned in the basement. As the actress bangs on the door and calls for help, Jeanne plays loud music in her room to drown out the noise. 2 days later, Bernard waves at a student's parent, Ghislaine. At the bar, the teacher and the other patrons watch a news report on TV detailing the actress's disappearance. 2 weeks later, the authorities are slowly losing hope of finding the missing woman. 1 month after the disappearance, Isabelle's mother appears on the news and asks for any information that might help the case. Eventually, Rogier tells reporters that they had no choice but to recast the role in the film because they had to start shooting in July. Meanwhile, Jeanne goes about her day-to-day life like normal, hoping not to attract any attention. Then, Pierre callously says that he wishes it was the unattractive bartender who went missing instead. Later, the woman returns home and heads to the basement. She points out the foul stench in the room and says someone as beautiful as Isabelle should never smell as bad as she does. The weak prisoner begs for food, but the captor orders her to head to the studio. While the starving actress poses on a bench, the artist paints the portrait on a canvas. Suddenly, she touches her stomach and says she doesn't feel well because she hasn't eaten in so long. However, the heartless captor approaches and tells her to remain in the pose. Then, Isabelle asks what Jeanne plans on doing once the authorities catch her, but she doesn't answer. Later, the bartender enjoys her meal while the actress is tied to a chair with tape over her mouth. She explains that the cops would never suspect her because because people often want to forget she even exists seconds after they see her face. Jeanne taunts Isabelle with her leftovers, but instead of giving them to the hungry woman, she feeds the scraps to George. Meanwhile, Bernard heads home after the bar and seems troubled by the actress's disappearance. In the basement, the prisoner cries in bed and imagines her mother gently touching her hair and telling her to try and understand how miserable her captor's life must be as an unattractive woman. During the next painting session, Isabelle asks if she can finally see the portrait, and the artist obliges. Then she commends her skill, but the painter recognizes the tactic and knows she's trying to establish a relationship with her captor, hoping to gain sympathy. After Jeanne leaves the room, the actress gets dressed and tries to sneak out. However, George intercepts and the bartender catches her. Moments later, the artist allows the prisoner into the room when she keeps the finished paintings. Isabelle sees paintings of animals in various stages of decay. She finally realizes that her captor wants to paint a series of portraits showing her body wasting away, so she faints and falls to the floor. Meanwhile, Bernard spends his evening cutting up news articles about the case. The next day, the man imagines the actress swimming in the lake before wading into the water and searching for her body. Concurrently, the weak prisoner falls off the bench and says she's dying from hunger. Because she isn't cooperating, Jeanne drags her back to the basement. Suddenly, she hears Bernard knocking on the door asking for a refill of his water canteen. The man says he didn't know she still lived in the house after her father passed away, especially since they don't speak to each other in the bar. From the basement, the actress calls out for help, but he doesn't hear her. Later, Isabelle imagines her parents talking outside the room, so she checks the door but finds that it's still locked. The next day, Jeanne takes the prisoner to the dining table and feeds her one small piece of food at a time. During the next painting session, the actress asks the bartender why she's fascinated with death and decay when it comes to her art. So the artist says she paints the way she does because beauty is deceptive, and that nature creates beauty only to destroy it. She adds that beauty makes her ugly because she doesn't conform to its standards. Isabelle counters that she has expressive eyes and maybe she should try dressing in feminine clothes. The bartender states she has already tried before and says that she would have preferred being disabled because people would at least pity her. The actress asks if she has ever shown people her art before, but the painter says there's no use trying since she's experienced enough heartbreak in her life. Eventually, Jeanne reveals her plan to send someone her paintings after they're finished. Isabelle wonders if she's worried the authorities might track her down, but the bartender says they'll both be dead by then. The woman shares that she plans on burning the house down because her life isn't worth it. Then, Jeanne shows the actress the latest portrait and foresees how her art is gonna cause a sensation. The next day, Isabelle tells her captor that being beautiful has its downsides too, such as when her best friend's boyfriend fell in love with her after their first meeting. She knew his feelings weren't genuine because he fell in love with her appearance, but it still caused irreparable damage to the friendship. She shares that her drama school teacher openly flirted with her during her evaluation even though all she wanted was a professional relationship. The woman adds that she's always had to be careful around men because even when she thinks they look beyond her physical appearance, she realizes that they only want her because of her beauty. When she asks Jeanne about her own experiences with men, the painter takes offense because it makes it seem as though she's so repulsive that no man would ever come near her. That evening, the bartender plays loud music in her room and dances on the bed. Because Isabelle left the faucet running, the painter finds her in a puddle in the basement. The furious woman says she'll never get out of the house alive because she's gonna rot in the basement. Before she leaves, Jeanne tearfully tells the actress how much she hates her. Moments later, the prisoner imagines Rogier apologizing for recasting her role because they can't halt production on a $7 million film. Meanwhile, Bernard stares at the shrine he built for the actress and promises he'll find her. Later, Ghislaine arrives with a pie for the teacher. However, when she asks if they can enjoy the pastry with some coffee, the man politely thanks her and goes back inside, worried she might see the shrine. Concurrently, Isabelle tells Jeanne that she shouldn't idealize beauty. She shares that no one listens to her opinions on set because if she voices out, she's always seen as arrogant. She adds that it's the same way with her romantic romantic relationships. They all start wonderfully, but she eventually realizes that all men wanted was her body. However, Isabelle says she won't let that happen to her anymore, prompting the painter to ask what she means. The actress says she's been alone for years and she'd prefer to keep it that way. Then, she tells the bartender that their lives aren't that different. Moments later, Jeanne says they should spend the rest of the afternoon outside. By the pond, Isabelle confides that she's been married twice before. Her first one was to an athlete who only talked about sports and didn't allow her to act. The second marriage was to an intellectual who tormented and abused her. Then, the bartender shares that her mother died when she was a child and her father was always busy. The man couldn't deal with the wife's death, so he hanged himself in the cellar a few months later. Because she was an orphan, she was sent to a boarding school, and all the other children bullied her due to her appearance. Moments later, Isabelle shares that she lost her father in a car accident. However, the captor recalls seeing her parents on the news, so the actress clarifies that the man is her mother's latest husband. Then, she shares that her mother married a man from Nice a few years after her father died. However, the stepfather abused her until she was finally able to run away from home as a teenager. After the woman tearfully recounts the harrowing moments in her life, she tells Jeanne that she is the only person she's told it to. The captor returns inside to grab food and drinks for them to enjoy. Before she goes outside, she throws her cigarette in the trash can. Later, Isabelle says she's decided to never let a man touch her again unless she's sure that he loves her for who she is inside. Jeanne tells her that she's lucky she gets to make that choice because no one ever wants to touch her. So the actress gently touches the woman's arm and face. Suddenly, the bartender hears the dog barking and realizes the animal's trapped inside the burning kitchen. At first, Isabelle considers running away while her captor's distracted, but when Jeanne begs her for help, she extinguishes the fire, saving the dog's life. Minutes later, the distraught woman hugs George and thanks the actress. Then, they head to the bathroom where Isabelle bathes the bartender. Jeanne says she can't imagine her life without George, so Isabelle tells her that the dog, the house, and her paintings mean she still has something to live for. The painter wonders if the woman hates her, but the actress says she doesn't because they both suffer from people not seeing them for who they really are. After the women hug, Jeanne says it may be time for Isabelle to take a proper bath. In the basement, the captor leaves some food for the prisoner and says she'll prepare her father's room so she can move into it tomorrow. Moments later, the actress realizes the door is unlocked, but when she goes up the stairs, she sees the chain on the gate. Then, the woman imagines talking to her parents and she acknowledges that she missed several opportunities to escape earlier, such as during the fire and how she could have drowned the captor in the tub. At the bar, Bernard asks Jeanne if she ever thinks about the missing actress. The woman says she probably just ran away, but the teacher counters that she doesn't have a reason to. So she tells the patrons about how Isabelle was abused by her stepfather from Nice and about her 2 failed marriages to an athlete and an intellectual. Jeanne says the story sounds familiar, but she isn't sure where she heard it before. Then, Bernard says the actress doesn't have a stepfather because her parents are still together. He adds that she's also never been married, but that she has a film director boyfriend. Jeanne asks the man where he learned this information, and he says he's closely studying the case. Suddenly, Jeanne remembers that the story about the stepfather from Nice and the failed marriages to the athlete and the intellectual were from Marilyn Monroe's biography. Furious and devastated that Isabelle lied to her, the bartender squeezes a glass too hard and it breaks, cutting her hand. As the woman leaves the bar, Bernard watches her and wonders what could have elicited such a reaction. Later, the captor trashes the basement using a tire iron and threatens to hit the prisoner. Then she runs outside and cries in the pouring rain. The next day, the teacher makes his way to the bartender's house. Meanwhile, Jeanne checks the basement and, to her horror, finds that the actress hanged herself using the bedsheet. Later, the man sees Isabelle's shoes by the pond and grabs them. Then, he sneaks into the house and goes down to the basement. At first, he thinks he was too late to save the actress, but the woman suddenly points to a chair, revealing that she's still alive. After Bernard places the chair under her feet, she opens her robes and shows him that she created a harness around her body using the bedsheet, an old film trick that gives the illusion of someone hanging themselves. Meanwhile, the painter tells George that he needs to leave. Then, she goes to the room with her paintings and douses her body with gasoline. As the pair sneaks out, Isabelle stays behind and tries to stop the captor from lighting herself on fire. She tells Jeanne that it was a trick and she's still alive. However, the bartender calls her deceitful and strangles her before lighting another match. The actress stands back up and watches the woman erupt in flames. As the pair make their way through the woods, the exhausted woman lies down on the ground for a few minutes. While she's unconscious, Bernard unties her wrap dress and creepily touches her body. When she wakes up, Isabelle puts on her shoes and says she's ready to continue the journey. After the harrowing experience, the actress regained all the lost weight in a matter of weeks. Isabelle also sought psychiatric help, decided she no longer wanted to act, and that she'd rather write a book.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.